Welcome to the CXO and CHRO Walk into a Bar, where we share insights at the intersection of talent and revenue. Dive into a unique narrative with our hosts, Michelle Strasburger, the insightful CHRO, and Dominique Sanfleur, the visionary CXO. Together, they bring dynamic perspectives that ignite thought-provoking dialogue from the C-suite. Each week, join us for electrifying sessions that confront the very challenges modern CXOs navigate in today's fast-paced business landscape. When split-second decisions loom, must it be talent or revenue that takes the hit? Or is there a harmonious crossroad where both can thrive? Can we blur the lines between talent and revenue? In every episode, we provide executive leaders with 3 strategic takeaways, transformative insights that will propel you to master the delicate balance between people and profit. It's not about winners or losers, but crafting an environment where everyone triumphs. Tune in and step closer to redefining executive success.
Hey, hey, hey.
Oh, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday indeed. I hope you've been having a good week so far.
It's been busy, but I've had a great week. Really good
Busy
week.
is always good. Busy is always good.
Yes. How about you?
Pretty good week. I feel it's going to get better with this conversation. I think this is, I think you pointed it out. It is strategic planning season for a lot of organizations. This topic is coming at a perfect time. A few nuggets to kind of think about common pitfalls when it comes to strategic planning. I've seen planning sessions, and I've gotten a sense for some of the struggles there. I haven't been part of a ton of them, but the few that I have been a part of, I do get a sense for some of the pitfalls that leaders may face. So, super excited to talk about this.
I'm excited to talk about it too. I think that there's a lot of times we create strategic plans and then we never hear about them again.
That's definitely one of them.
I think this is a good topic. Where do we want to start? I mean, one of the things that I see with strategic planning is it's so much time invested in it, right? You do an offsite, you do team building, you've got the executive leadership team, building this strategy, and it's really a key component to how we're going to do business over the next few years. And then from that, you then derive your annual goals and things like that. But then what I see happen is that the goals are then siloed into departments from maybe it's the CFO and CHRO and CMO or CRO, and they take what's theirs and they leave the rest of it for everybody else. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is then that's siloed down into the organization, and then happens is competing priorities. Mm-hmm. And you meet 6 months later and you're like, why are we not on plan? Why are we not on target? And I think it's because you have those competing priorities. So if I'm in HR and I'm responsible for turnover, engagement, recruitment, but I'm not getting what I need from leaders because they're focused on building revenue and other things, their priorities, right? They're going to follow what they're goaled on. And so, they may not get back to me as quickly as I need to hire and things like that. And so my goals fall short, or vice versa, right? I've got other priorities. And so you're coming to me and saying, hey, I need to get this done. And I'm like, it's going to have to wait a week. And so creating, I think, that alignment at the top of this is our goal as a team, and this is how we have to achieve that, I think is really key to executing on the strategy. Because once you silo it, you're just going to have competing priorities across the organization.
Michelle, I totally agree, right? Where if my priorities aren't your priorities, then what are we doing, right?
It's fair. It's totally fair, right? My boss told me I have to do this. It's totally fair. But I think it creates friction in the organization, and it creates, an inability to move the ship ahead when we're not kind of all rowing in the same direction. So how do you make sure that those goals are shared and you've got teams, maybe even cross-functional teams, that are working on achieving those within the organization, and it's not just in a silo, so people are working together?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's as I sit back and listen to us, right? It's an odd concept if you really take a step back. Is how could we all be at one organization and my priorities not be your priorities, right? Irrespective of your function. It is an odd thing to kind of think about where you could develop competing priorities within one organization because like what needs to be true for that to happen, right? You how can an organization start to pursue multiple different goals that are not congruent? That's a setup for failure. But I think it's just so common, right? People have their own fiefdoms or their own territory that they're carving out. They have their own way of standing out. They have their own KPIs. They have their own incentive plans that are structured differently. You put a strategic plan in place, and everybody at the beginning is very hurrah for it. But as reality hits, and the urgencies of life, day to day business happens, people start drifting in different paths. And this relates to one of the other challenges, but the siloedness of it, right? If it doesn't start that way, then very quickly ends up being that way. But oftentimes it can definitely start off that way where, to your point, marketing is just going to take that part of the strategic plan, focus on that, and it is not brought into context of the other functions. And other functions will do the same. And you effectively have multiple horses pulling the cart in different directions. And that's just going to lead to a pretty big disaster. So I totally agree on that. Before we jump into some of the other ones, the siloed, nature of some of the strategic plans. As leaders are going into strategic planning season, what is something they can do? Like, what is a solution for this? What is the antidote? Because I think it's a very common problem. Not only a beginning antidote, but as the organization's progressing through the through the next year, drift is going to start to happen. How do we start off well, but also maintain alignment as things go by? What are some best practices that you've seen?
I think pulling in the right people. I had a CEO once that was great at doing this, where we have the strategic plan and then he would break the executive team into task forces. How do we achieve this? How do we break this down? And so we would all be part of a different task group to get that done. And it was a shared goal, right? And a shared. So like if, for example, our goal at Acme Corp is to increase revenue over the next 3 years 5 times. We're going to increase revenue 5 times for the next 3 years, right? It's basic. That's probably not going to be a strategic goal, but that's our goal, right? That doesn't then just go to sales. Like sales, you're the revenue people. You need to do this. This needs to be then held at the executive team of like, how do we do this? How do we achieve this as an organization? And how do we all play into that? Right. And what are my responsibilities to help driving that? What are sales responsibilities? Sales can have a big piece of it, but we all should have responsibilities. And then our goal can be derived from that. And I think it's easy. Like a business changes so fast. And there's been we've talked in this past calls about headwinds, right? There's been a lot of headwinds this year. And so you have to pivot or you have to decide just to stay steady and ride through it. But I think there should be some type of working agreement when you put this in place on what the funnel is. Like when we get something in, if there's change or headwinds, we put it through this decision-making funnel. And if it aligns with the strategy, we charge ahead. If it doesn't align with the strategy, maybe we don't do it. Maybe we just leave it and we table it for our next strategic conversation, because it's so easy to kind of follow the next shiny object and get excited about something and be like, yes, let's do this. But really putting it through that decision-making funnel or process, and your executive team can be that decision-making team, like what do we want to do with this? We've got this, there's a headwind coming in, there's this new revenue opportunity. A customer came in and they want us to customize something. We don't customize, right? But it's a big opportunity. Are we going to shift our whole ship to make this happen? And sometimes you do make that decision, but I think there has to be some guidelines within your strategy of like, well, when do we make a shift? What are those things that have to be in play, and kind of use that as your decision-making funnel?
There's something that an executive said. I forget who it was, but they said, I forget who it was, but they say no to very attractive opportunities quite often. Not that they're not great opportunities. It's very, very hard. But he says no to very attractive opportunities often. Yeah. And I think that's part of the hardness, is that you get a lot of shiny objects, and some are very, very promising, very, very attractive. You can go down that path, but you do have a plan in place, and you go after this thing, now you go after that thing, then this headwind happens, and now you're very, very quickly are very jumbled, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think part of it is choosing. It's hard to say no to some of these options as they come up, right? AI, when it started, really getting popular, of course you can't say no to that. But how does that fit into a plan that you probably, that you may have put in place before AI started to quote unquote get hot, right? And how do you kind of think about that? How do you think about the trade-offs? Nothing's free. But if you're going to pivot, are you pivoting for the right things? It's a lot of these tricky things, and there are a lot of shiny objects to pursue. And how do you say no to a lot of them, and stay the course and stay focused? When there are, different types of competing pressures. So I think that's a very, thanks for pointing that reality out. It's a very tough one.
It's a tough one. And I think deciding that as part of the strategic process, like what are we going to say no to? And so that it's clear. So you can go back to that and say, remember, we agreed, right? We have this working agreement that we're going to say no to things like this. And then there could be things like, that filter, right? That funnel that we're putting things through, that filter of like, maybe does it accelerate our ability to get to our goal? Like AI, right? Does it accelerate, instead of maybe 5 times growth in 3 years, we could do 5 times growth in 2 years? Then maybe that's something we want to look into. Does it really shift our strategic focus? Maybe that's something you want to say no to. Or does it slow us down? Will it hinder the business? Does it affect how does it affect the people, right? You can have some of those questions already derived in your strategic plan. So that if something does come in that's new, you can go through that process. And it helps too with the executive leadership team to be able to point to that and say, remember, we agreed we would do this. So instead of being like, okay, CEO, you're just sending us on a wild goose chase all the time, you can point to the working agreement. We agreed during the strategic plan, we were going to put it through this process and put it through this filter. I think we should do that and try it and see if it works. And if it does, we should move forward. And if it doesn't, let's say no. And it makes it easier. Talk about the thing and not the person. It makes it much easier.
True. It has to be a living document, right? And this kind of relates to one of the pitfalls, but it has to be a living document. It can't be something that is put into a PowerPoint, presented to the board at the beginning of the, before the next fiscal year, and you never revisit it, right? That's oftentimes the last time someone sees a strategic plan is after it's presented to the board. We got that out the way. We met, the big presentation, and everybody's just kind of back to, it's almost like a ceremonial exercise that people do. It's just this big deliverable that everybody has to contribute to. It's delivered, and that's considered the accomplishment in itself, right? Is delivering the strategic plan, not necessarily following it, or kind of adding discipline around it. It's just oftentimes it's just treated like this document or exercise that people put a lot of effort into. presenting it, but not necessarily following it. And so I think, again, part of the siloedness is people just kind of go back to their silos and not really take the strategic plan in context. But I think that was a good one. So to recap our first one, and I think we had a few other little nuggets there, but it's siloed targets, siloed goals. People tend to take the pieces of strategic plan that relates to them and go off and do that. And as the year goes by, there's competing priorities that manifest, right? In different pockets of the organization. And that's especially true if it's not revisited frequently enough. And, there isn't a filtering mechanism to make sure, no new things, no new priorities get added without some proper filtering, so that the teams and different teams don't chase different shiny objects.
Right.
Right. So
I worked with an organization once too that they had a very rigorous process, and at the time it was grueling, but I appreciate it now, where every month we had an ops review and each department had to put together their slides with their KPIs and what are their targets, and is it, we would color code it red, yellow, green. Red means we're blocked, and we would talk about it. A little behind, but we're going to get there, and we've got some challenges, but we're going to overcome it. And green means we're on target. And it was a very simple process, but then you would talk through it. So everybody was on the same page. The executive leadership team was in the room, and we went through every single one. It was a long day. We went through every single one, but everybody's on the same page, and you have the opportunity to say, we're blocked because we're not getting what we need from marketing. We're not getting what we need from HR. We're not, you can call out those things and you can have those conversations. And so you're having it on a monthly basis instead of waiting till the end of the year. Review time or like close to the end of the year and like, what are we doing? Are we going to meet our goals? You have that every month. Everybody knows where we are, and you can be more agile and you can shift easier.
As you were talking, one idea kind of came to mind that might be helpful for leaders. And I think what you mentioned is very, very helpful, right? I think the frequency and the cadence of it is very, very helpful, right? Again, one problem with strategic plans is they're formed, delivered, not really revisited, right? It's not a living document.
Yeah.
The process that you set, that you mentioned, is we're checking every month, right? We're as a team, right? As a team, we're discussing everybody's KPIs together so that we have a fuller picture frequently. I think that's excellent. I think another thing that could add to that is if, as part of that process, if an organization really organized itself on central KPIs, no specific department has their own KPIs per se. This is kind of an idea that came to my mind. Yes. But everybody had to report how they contributed to the central KPI. How did you push the central KPI forward, right? Mm-hmm. You discuss as a team central KPIs, right, or central metrics. Whether it be the rate, increasing revenue over X for the next 5 years. HR discusses specifically how did I contribute to that KPI, and then the next department talks about what initiatives they're doing to contribute to that KPI. And I think that helps with a few things. One, alignment, right? Not every, people are taking on initiatives and putting effort behind things that are directly related to the mission, and they have to defend how that is relevant, right? In a very clear fashion. And of course, sales can make a very clear argument, but I think it gets very interesting when supporting functions have to make the same case as well, right? And so that helps the teams really think about and really align their work around those central KPIs, because HR really start thinking about, okay, what do I need to do day to day to help sales move forward in a very real and tangible way? And then all the other departments as well, whether it be ops, IT, all have to do the same thing, and everybody's kind of rowing the boat in the same direction. So I think that's another element that could be helpful.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's what I was alluding to earlier, where you set the strategic plan and then it's like, okay, how do we as the executive leadership team contribute to that in our organizations, instead of having competing goals where I get a piece of the plan, you get a piece of the plan, they get a piece of the plan. But I think it has to be clear up front. So it's not just, ad hoc. How are you contributing to these goals? I think it needs to be clear, like, this is what we do contributes to that, right? If our goal is to increase revenue, HR might have to work on their employer brand, right? Because people might come to the organization, not just to work there, but check us out, because they want a job, but then maybe buy the products because they like what we're offering. So I think it just needs to be clear up front, and then, constantly reviewed.
Absolutely. Another pitfall in which I think is very, very important to mention when it comes to strategic plans is it kind of relates with the silos, but more broadly in an odd way is planning in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an interesting fact that a lot of leaders or leadership teams will come up with a strategic plan within themselves. And the only people at the table, discussing the strategic plan are all leaders of that organization. What I think would be helpful or essential is at the table, frontline workers, at the table, customers, having an active role in participating in the strategic plan, informing the strategic plan, so that you get a holistic point of view. I think often, strategic plans are something that is either somewhat cascaded up and ultimately just discussed with a few leaders and then presented to the board, very, very high level. I think not having input from the people directly doing the work, there's some missed opportunities there and some gaps and blind spots, but it's very, very essential as well. Getting customers, your current customers, but also customers you don't have but you want, part of your strategic planning would be very, very helpful, because it's going to really help you think a lot more broadly about how you serve your customers better, because ultimately that's what it's about. Mm-hmm. And I don't think a lot of organizations really provide a seat at the table for the front line and also customers they currently have or want. What are your thoughts?
I like that. And it can be the proverbial seat at the table, right? It doesn't have to be you have one customer or one employee at the table when you're doing this, but gathering that data ahead of time. I mean, usually you start a strategic plan with a SWOT analysis, right? And so if you're not gathering that feedback ahead of time, your SWOT analysis is built with tunnel vision. And so, within the different departments, maybe they work with their teams to gather feedback, do the SWOT analysis within their teams. Where are the things that you think we could go in the future, and bring that with them, getting customer feedback, customer insights, working with customer service to find out what are the biggest pain points, what are you hearing, what are customers looking for? And that should be done on a regular basis, but I do think it's important to have that at the strategic table when you're going through this planning process. So it doesn't have to be a physical person, but I definitely think you have to include as much feedback and data as possible. So if you're doing any type of engagement surveys, feedback surveys, customer insight groups or things like that, all of that data can be brought to the table and given to the leadership team ahead of time. It could be part of the slide deck. Usually the CEO stands up and says, okay, let me take you through some of this stuff, why we're doing this, what we're doing, give you some insights and history. Like that insight and stuff can be brought into that conversation at that point. So it grounds everybody and gives them a foundation, and then they can move forward. I think it's key. I think it's a missed opportunity if you're definitely not doing it.
And I think it's probably too common that I totally agree, Michelle. I think it's too common. It's not that proverbial seat at the table is not created for some of the very important stakeholders that are part of the success of the organization. Customers being prime, and your frontline employees being prime, right? You're not going to succeed without those two stakeholders. You have to understand, and you have to share with them, here's how we're thinking about the business for the next year, the next 2 years, the next 3 years, 5 years. What are your thoughts? What are we missing? Mm-hmm. Right? Having that input, and not just having it be a leadership exercise. It has to be an exercise that involves a broad set of perspectives, both internal and external to the organization, with current customers you want, current employees, and maybe employees that you want. Right?
Mhm.
What are some of the talent that I would like to attract in the future? Let's go have conversations with those type of people and help us understand and put in context a little better of how that can inform our strategic plan, right? And so I think what we discussed, one, silo targets. Related to that too is the planning and isolation, right? This just leadership has to create space for some of these other stakeholders that are super critical to have to inform the strategic plan.
I think it's a great way to get buy-in as well, right? And so, I mean, how great would it be if you're an employee and your leader came to you and said, "We're working on the strategic plan. Here's kind of general direction, what we're thinking about. Where are the pain points? Where's the friction? What else should we be thinking about? What are we missing?" And then when the strategic plan is done and given back to the employees, like, here's our direction, here's where we're going, and we got there through feedback from everybody. That employee feels good, like, okay, I'm here for this. I'm in. And they get buy-in, and it's an easy way to get buy-in and get excitement for the strategic plan, even though you're not done with it yet.
And I think what you said is super important. I think even if what the employee, let's say even if that particular employee did not agree with the direction where the company goes, having had the opportunity to contribute their perspective, they can still, one of the core principles of Amazon is disagree and commit, because I think that's important as well, right? They could still get buy-in, but it's nothing like getting buy-in, trying to get buy-in from someone who does not agree and had no say in it. I think too often strategic plans are just kind of formed and then top down, just given to employees in a town hall, rather than before it's finalized, before it's formed, allowing people to participate and have their feedback molded a bit, and then bring it back in its final form, is a lot more collaborative, and gets buy-in. Even if everybody's not on board, you'll still get a higher chance of disagree and commit, or just straight commit from that. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, one of the companies I worked for, we brought in a consultant, Paul Stimson. He does systems thinking and systems processes. So, if we do this, then this happens. If we do this, then this happens. And we did it as part of our strategic plan. We brought in a group of people, leaders from other parts of the organization, and we went through that whole, we went through the whole system. And it was a great exercise to give us that feedback from the employees and the leadership of, like, what do we need to do? Like, what's working in the organization? What's not working? Where is the system broken? And where do we need to fix it? And how does that play into the future of the organization was really key. It's a great process to go through. And I'll put his LinkedIn link in the profile, in the comments.
That's, in what you just said there with systems thinking, reminded me of another piece. I think the third piece that's that's usually a friction with strategic planning, is that strategic planning usually talks about systems and metrics, but highly, highly biased towards financial and operational metrics, right? Which is normal, fine, and whatnot. But the people side is often not. It doesn't. It's usually a byproduct or a derivative discussion to the strategic plan. It's not. I don't think it makes it often enough as a central part of the strategic plan, right? Mm-hmm. Who are my people? Are they engaged? Are they productive? If not, what do we need to do to change that, and to make them more productive, bought in, so that all these other systems can work, right? The most important part of any system are going to be the people who are involved in it. And I've had conversations where leaders really only think about the technical systems, and not about the people systems and how people interact with them. Because ultimately, whether or not the strategic plan makes it is going to really depend on right seats, on the right people in the right seats, but also that needs maintenance, right? They could be in the right seats and head in the right direction, but things happen. But I think one thing that could make it more in strategic plans is the people side, the people metrics, not just the financial and operational metrics. That needs to be, I think it's, a third, a third, a third. It should be a third financial metrics, a third financial operational metrics, a third, people metrics, right? And again, a lot of these measures around engagement, productivity, culture, really trying to quantify and define that for the organization to make sure that you have the right fuel behind, in the engine.
Yeah, I think first I'm sending you a virtual hug. But because I think it's the thing I fight for a lot when we're going through strategic plans. It's like, what about the people? What do we need for people? And I've seen strategic plans fail because they don't think about that. And then all of a sudden we're in a race to hire somebody. And I'm just going to pop this in here. So this is, Neha just shared it. Thank you, Neha. This is Paul Simpson's contact information. So a plug for Paul. And we're not getting paid to say that. But he was really great. But I think people is part of the system, right? What are the skill sets we're going to need to do this? Do we have that skill set? Do we buy the skill set? Do we train the skill set? Can we upskill people, reskill people? What's going to happen if we move in this direction? Are there departments we need to shift? So the people, I also think about how does this affect our people is another aspect. And then the other piece is how do we communicate this to our teams to get them behind it and excited and bought in? I was at one organization and I was reporting to the CFO and we were going through a cultural transformation. And he's like, our team needs a rallying cry. It's always good to be second because then you have somebody to chase, right? But we need a rallying cry. And I really buy into that of you need to give people something that they understand it and they can work towards it. One organization, we had a goal to grow 5 times in 5 years. So we had communications all around 5 by 5, and it was just easy to swallow and easy to understand. And, people could remember it. What's our strategic plan? 5 by 5. And so, in another organization we were going to impact so many patient lives because we sold vitamins and supplements. And so we were going to improve so many patient lives. And that was the goal, right? All the strategic pieces worked up to that one piece. If we execute on our strategic plan, we're going to improve this many lives. And it was just a target for people and it was easy to understand. And I think that's missed too when we communicate all the gobbledygook. I'm sorry, from the non-financial person, the gobbledygook. And we don't think about how does that then relate to somebody who might not be in a financial position, who might be working customer service? How do I connect with that? What's in it for me, right? Why is this important for me? And if you can get their heart behind it because there's a message they can connect to, it's going to help you. They're going to row the boat faster, right?
There's one last piece. I know we're.
It's a good topic, though. We could go on forever.
It's a good topic. I know, and something you said, I think, brought together a few pieces for me. And it's about motivation. I think there's a disconnect between motivation from leaders and general employees. Not to say that's a bad thing. It's. I think culture is a measure of motivation. Are your people motivated to execute the strategic plan, right? And so you have your financial metrics, you have your operating metrics, and you have your people metrics, right? And the people metrics are important because are your people, everybody, how do you measure that motivation, that level of motivation to execute, to go, because sometimes it's going to require some sacrifice and whatever it may be, right? Are people motivated for that, right? And I think where culture is important is a way to help manage or improve motivation. right?
Mhm.
Because if employees aren't getting something from the experience, you're not going to get a lot of motivation to see this plan through. And just because you're a leader and you have a bunch of stock options that are, you know, uh, really tied to this plan, and so that's your motivation. That's great, but that regular employees, your problem's not necessarily their problem. So the last, and I don't want to, but it put together for me a little bit of how important culture is, because it's in a way measuring motivation, and without motivation to that strategic plan from everybody, you as a leader could be super motivated, but you're just one person. If you don't have motivation, uh, and that's not something you're going to force, right? You're going to have to be you're going to have to create an environment where motivation develops in a natural way. But I think that motivation to execute, if it's not there, then you can have the best plan in the world. And if you don't have that people factor as part of your strategic plan, you're not going to get the motivation behind it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to share too. I have this white paper called The Engagement Illusion, and it talks to that, where the closer you are to the decision making and to the top, because you're part of the strategic plan, so you get it, right? The more connected and engaged you are, the further away you get from that, the less engaged you are. But the problem is, those people that are at the decision making and the leaders that get the strategic plan and get why decisions are being made and things like that, they believe that the other people have the same level of engagement.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one, and I will send it over to Neha to post for us.
Yeah, I totally agree. Those disconnects are super important, and they're people based, and so people have to be the central part of the strategic plan, and oftentimes it's not discussed enough.
Yeah, yeah. So great. Well, we've been over time, but it's a good conversation, and we can talk more and more and more about it. But we'll put some notes in the comment section so you can go back to, and would love to hear your stories around why strategic plans fail.
Michelle, thank you. Neha, thank you.
Yeah. Cheers.
You've just experienced another episode of The CXO and CHRO Walk into a Bar, where we share insights at the intersection of talent and revenue. Thank you for joining us. Please join us next week at noon Eastern for more strategic content to help you scale your business. You can follow us on LinkedIn and on YouTube for additional content or episodes you may have missed. The links will be in the comments section. If you'd like more information or to schedule time with Michelle or Dominique, follow the link in the comments section to book time on their calendar. Until next week, cheers.